Copywriting is one of the most crucial parts in online marketing, but it's also a very, very big and important part for native advertising campaigns. For example, we in our agency, PurpleBlack, are always working for every campaign for our clients and for our own projects with pre-landers. So we try on those pre-landers to convert a completely cold audience to a very hot, ready-to-buy audience. But how we do this? It's nothing given or something like that. We have a step-by-step process to convert a completely cold audience to a hot, ready-to-buy audience. And I want to share in this video with you how we are doing this.
Alright guys, this what I will show you here in the next few minutes is extremely valuable content which we also use in our agency to learn for new employees. It's important for you to understand the systematic behind of the strategy to get implemented in your company, into your agency, etc. So it's extremely important for you that you really 100% understand it, and if not so, then just repeat the video, watch it again until you understand it. Because before we start, it's not a typical thing. Many people think, okay, you just search a topic for you and then start writing and you have some genius ideas and something like that, and everything is like hacking in the night with rain outside, dark light in the cellar or something like that. But it's not the case. It's very systematic, and that's the big benefit why you also can learn it, because it's systematic. It's the strategy behind of copywriting. But let's directly jump in. And as I mentioned now, it's not the big idea or something like that. It's just important for you to ask you 3 important questions before you start. The question is, or the first question is, what is the mass desire that motivates your market? So for example, it depends from time to time what's the big mass desire from the market out there. For example, currently we have, especially here in Europe, very high energy prices and something like that. So that's a very huge mass desire. So it's money saving, save energy costs and something like that. But it's important for you to know what's the big mass desires out there. And you can learn it, you can research it. For example, if you watch the news, read papers and stuff like that. So you can very fast see what the market is motivated in. To be honest, the mass desire is not what you can research now, completely blind into a topic, read it and zack, in 5 minutes you have it. That's not the case, because the borders are not really sharp here. So you have to gather more information over a longer time period. Here is a big advantage for you if you're in the country or if you're in the market, to see what is the big desire of the market. That's a very big benefit for you if you already have some insights from the market or can reach out for people who are in the market. The next question, which is super important for you, is the state of sophistication. So how many products which are very similar to your product or service have been already presented to the prospects? Are they already extremely familiar with some similar products or something like that? Did they already know what the product is doing, what the service is doing, what's in it for them and something like that? If so, you have to ask you, okay, why didn't they buy it? Or where is your product or your service better in? That's a very important question here, the state of sophistication. And last but not least is the state of awareness. So how much does your market already know about your product or your service? And that's especially is the point where we can get more information, more details about it. Because as I mentioned before, this here is nothing which you can research now in just 5 minutes and have some pretty ideas. That's not the case. You have to speak with people from the market, or in an ideal case, you're part of the market and can feel the motivation, the mass desire from the people, from the audience. State of sophistication is a research, to be honest. You can research with, for example, native with tools like Anstrix, Facebook Ads Library, TikTok Ads Library, to see how many products, how many services were already advertised to the audience out there in the last couple of days, months or years. And the state of awareness is a very important point, because there's not just one state of awareness, there are audience groups with different stage of awarenesses. For example, here we have 3 state of awarenesses. Of course, there are much more, but let's make it simple with 3 state of awarenesses. And it's important for you to cluster it. So we have this cluster parts, and there is not just in one market, not just this or this state of awareness. There are all 3 state of awarenesses, and you have to decide which one you want to represent in. So for example, maybe you say, this part here is not very interesting for me because I'm very expensive, but let's jump into it a little bit. So the most aware people are that people who already know your product. They already see your product or a similar product, know what it does, know what's in it for them and something like that. So they're just waiting for a good deal to make the purchase. They're just waiting for a free for 2 offer, or I don't know, free plus shipping and something like that. So they're just waiting for a good deal to get to make the purchase. So it sounds great, but they're not just benefits, to be honest, because people in this state of awareness know a lot of your product, knows a lot of the niche. So they also know the prices. They're familiar with the prices. They already double-check prices with different sources and stuff like that. So it's important for you here to know if you're one of the cheapest, or maybe the cheapest, or do you have, or if you have special conditions. This approach makes sense for you, but if you're one of the most expensivest, if you have a product which is a mass product, which have a lot of suppliers and something like that, then this approach might be not a very good fit for you, because people see it, people say, okay, it's a good offer, but it's not the offer where I want to, which I want to buy now. The next state of awareness is the customer already knows the product but doesn't want it yet. And here the prospect isn't completely aware of all what the product does. So the prospect already saw the product, know in some ways what it does or what it didn't do and something like that. But there is not enough information for the prospect that he or she will buy the product now. So here the big part, or your big homework, is to show what the product does, what's in it for the prospect, what is something new or something special which the prospect might be not known yet and which convinced him to buy the product now. So the goal here is just to convince the client, just to convince the prospect, to give them more information, the last informations they need to buy the product here. That could be something very special, so a special function, a new benefit or something like that, which is not a mass benefit, but which is a pretty benefit, which is legit and which is something special. So that's working here for this state of awareness very, very well. And last but not least, we have a completely cold audience. So the prospect either knows or recognizes immediately the product, never seen something like that, or anything else. That's the case for a new innovative product, but also for some products into new markets. So long story short, the prospect doesn't know anything about the product, maybe also might not know that there's a solution for his problem. And of course, that's one of the hardest approaches, but that's the biggest market opportunity. So for example, normally you start here with the most aware people because that's easy. You can generate very easy sales here, just make a free shipping or make a good sale here and you can generate the first sales. But of course, there's just a small percentage of the market which is in this state of awareness. So it's not unlimited scalable. In comparison to that, the completely cold audience is scalable because most people out there might be not familiar with your product or with your service, so it's extremely scalable. And you see already here, there are some different states of awarenesses and there are different approaches for every state of awareness. So for example, here for the most aware people, there is just a price drop or just a free shipping information, which could be enough to generate a sale. If the customer already knows the product but doesn't want it yet, you just send them or show them many more benefits. Maybe there's just one benefit which they need to make the purchase, or maybe there are 2 or 3 benefits to get the purchase here. That could be something which is how do you use the product, how simple it is. Just show the people how they can use it, what's the big benefit or the big advantage here. Maybe it's money saving advantage, but maybe it's something different which they want to, or which they has to know to make the purchase. And last but not least, the biggest audience by far is the completely cold audience. And here's the biggest scaling potential, because of course it's the hardest way, but the biggest scaling potential is here because the people are completely cold. You can convince them through an advertorial into a ready to buy prospect, which of course already buys after he or she is reading the advertorial. And I already dropped the information that you have to try different approaches. And what I mean by that is something like that. So you have different pillar contents, which we call approaches. For example, you have one approach, which is a money-saving approach. You have a second approach, which is a completely new approach because it's a trendy product or something like that. And you have a third approach. And of course, you can link it because you can try this approach for the most aware people, which might be a money-saving approach. Or you can use this approach for or you can use this prospect state of awareness that the customer knows the product but doesn't want it yet, to show how simple it is. So it's like a how to use the product, how easy it is, how much do you save, and something like that. And you have the third prospect state of awareness, which is a completely cold audience, where you have to, I just write here a scammy approach, but let's jump a little bit more into it. You have now 3 pillar contents, which are completely different. So for example, this is a money saving approach, and let's jump here into a little bit more details. So you're searching one big content, one big pillar content, and write different advertorials here because you don't know yet which advertorial here might work best. So in our agency, we do the following thing. We're using this approach, for example, a money-saving approach, and write 3 advertorials with this approach. One advertorial, which is very, very short, where we just give a few informations. That's it. Then we have the medium approach, which is a little bit long, and a very long approach for people who want to read more, who want to get more information about it. That's the structure we need, or we use for every approach. We use it for approach 1, for approach 2, for approach 3. So for example, for 3 approaches, you have altogether 9 advertorials, which is pretty decent. And what we do now is we test everything against each other. So we running campaigns with this approach, campaign 1, campaign 2, campaign 3, and so on and so forth. But of course, there are a lot of more campaigns for every approach. There are different campaigns for each device, for each country, and something like that, but that's too much for this video. Here it's just going about the general information for copywriting. And what we do now is we see by data which advertorial works best. So maybe we saw that this advertorial here for this approach is the best one. What we do then is we create different advertorials like that. So we have now our baseline with the short, and we try short 1, short 2, short 3, and so on and so forth. I think you get it. Because we already saw this angle is working, and then we just want to create more, generate more advertorials in this angle to test it always against each other. Because we never ever run a campaign with just one advertorial. We always test everything against each other to get the best KPIs at the end of the day and to generate the cheapest sale. All right, let's recap it because I think it's a bit complicated. So let's recap it in a very few seconds. First of all, there are 3 important questions which you have to ask yourself before you start. Please don't think about a genius idea or something like that, which you have to have in the shower. So that's not the case. It's a structured process which you have to get familiar with. Please then check the prospect state of awareness. There are overall 3 state of awarenesses: the most aware, the medium aware, and the completely cold audience. And then you have to create different pillar contents. You can use, like we here in our sample, 3 approaches, but of course it's also okay if you're just using 2 approaches. But I would recommend you to try a minimum amount of 2 approaches just to have at least an A/B test. And then you have to see, driven by KPIs, which advertorial and which approach might work best. Because maybe for the money saving approach is the short advertorial, but maybe for the how to use approach is the long advertorial. But before you start a campaign, you didn't know it. You have to start a campaign and make the decisions KPI driven. And as I mentioned before, it's a bit complicated, and I would highly recommend you to watch this part here, this content part, again and again, until you really understand it for 100%.
I hope you liked this video. If so, I would be extremely honored if you follow my YouTube channel and never ever miss an update about native advertising again.